Tonight, it's my pleasure to introduce Herb. He's a dear friend who is here twice a month, and I see him other places. Actually, I see him every week all the time, and that's pretty awesome for me. Herb is continuing to lead us through the 12 steps with a spiritual and emotional sobriety focus that will add important dimension to our recovery processes. He's going to continue to explore step 8 tonight. And in the past, last week, he talked about, or 2 weeks ago, he talked about making amends, forgiving others, and possibly being forgiven by them, in addition to forgiving ourselves. But today, he's going to be looking at the harms that we've done, how we can change our behavior and repair the damage we might have done to other people, and I suspect to ourselves too. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Herb. So Herb, I can hardly wait to hear what you have to say.
Me too. My name is Herb and I'm an alcoholic. Thank you, Patrick, for setting up this. Wow, it's a yeoman's task to continue to organize speakers and the agenda, etc. And Susie, such a wonderful administrator and facilitator to manage the meeting, and I really appreciate all of the consideration and support that you guys give me and the work that I do. This is my email. You're welcome to use it. Use common sense, please. But the most important piece of this PowerPoint that you see is my website address, herbk.com. Really simple, very straightforward, herbk.com. And on that website are the Berlin groups in my no, that's not true. On my website are many resources that support the work, especially the way of life document. You go to my workshops and you can take a look at, maybe even download. It's a 68-page document. Very, very, I believe, I've got a lot of feedback, worthwhile document to support the journey through all of the 12 steps. And some of the slides that I'll show today are captured in that material. On my YouTube channel, that's where I was going with the Berlin recordings. They're on my YouTube channel, edited and clean and very available in one of the playlists. Forgiveness is a process. It's not an event, and it's not even actually a single talk. But my sense is, from my own personal experience, that forgiveness begins with the 4th step and concludes with the completion of the 9th step. So it's not any one particular step that is the key for forgiveness. It's the accumulated impact of the application of each of the steps 4 through 9, of course 1 through 12, but specifically 4 through 9. And you'll see the parallel if you read Dr. Luskin's book, Forgive for Good, which I recommend to everybody, but only after you've done the steps out of the big book, completing step 9 or someplace in there. What's the point here? You've seen this if you've seen me. If you've seen any of my presentations, this is my favorite slide. The bondage of addiction and the bondage of self, the 2 halves of the 1st step. I've been taking this journey with you since January, dividing it up in some way to capture each of the steps, each of the months that I'm here, the 1st half of the step in the 2nd Monday, the 2nd half of the step, usually in the 4th Monday. That's been the rhythm. Step 8 is no different. Last week 2 weeks ago, I talked about step 8, the first 3 components of it, as at least I see it. And today I'm going to talk about the final component of step 8. And next time I come together, we'll be talking about step 9. And then the second Monday, the first meeting that I have in September, the second Monday, I'll be talking about the forgiveness process. My knowledge and my experience with it. Stand back just for a minute, way back on the top of the mountain and look at, well, what are we talking about here? We're talking about 12-step spirituality. Spirituality is kind of a foggy term and kind of a perhaps mystical term and maybe even a negative term for some people. I use a synonym, relationship. The 12 steps are a human methodology. Please hear that. A human methodology to have a relationship with power, with life. Oh, yes, we call it God as we don't understand it. My interpretation. Higher power as we don't understand it. The magic silver bullet of the 12-step process is that we have no theology, no dogma. You get to make a choice on your own. God is or God isn't. Power is or power isn't. What's your choice? A relationship with life. I really, especially in the context of the theme, emotional sobriety, it's such a better word to use for steps 2 and 3. A relationship of alignment with life. And then the next 4 steps are a relationship with myself, cleaning out the clouds and obstacles in me to the sunlight that is in me, the life force that is in me. It isn't me, but it is in me and it's available to me. That's the whole point. Read Appendix 2, Spiritual Awakening, Spiritual Experience. The crossover 3 words from page 567, 568. Unsuspected inner resource. Fabulous. Unsuspected. I didn't know, and I didn't know that I didn't know. Inner. It never occurred to me that I had a power inside of me that wasn't me, that was available to me. A resource, unsuspected inner resource. A relationship with myself for the very first time. Now, it didn't happen as an event, it happened as a process. One of my favorite images is the dimmer switch, not a light switch. Captures the experience of spiritual awakening, not spiritual experience, but spiritual awakening. That gradual, glacially slow, oh my God, so tedious, glacially slow transformation of the turning of my self-centeredness to other-centeredness. That's this process here. It's interesting, the steps at first led me to believe I was walking up a staircase to a plateau. But after I did the steps 3 different times in the first 10 years of my sobriety, I realized it's not a staircase that is linear, it's a staircase that's spiral. Because I keep meeting the same obstacles. I keep meeting myself. I keep meeting new experiences as I navigate this path. And now we're talking about establishing an effective relationship with others, clearly the heart of emotional sobriety. Oh, establishing a relationship with life, excellent. Establishing a relationship with myself, a sine qua non, meaning you can't do this without that. But the entire purpose is the turning to have a relationship, the turning from my self-centeredness, the heart of unmanageability. If you haven't read pages 60 to 62 and applied it to yourself personally, read it out loud, personal pronoun, present tense. It'll embarrass you, but it will talk about set aside. It will give you the curtain will part and you will have a completely new perspective. I'm not overstating it. 10 years sober, that was the invitation. And that was the experience I had. Pages 60 to 62, the spiritual malady, unmanageability, the reason for the bedevilments. Personal pronoun, present tense. Read it out loud with nobody else in the room. You'll turn red. You'll be embarrassed if you haven't done it before. But here we are, the final phase of the turning. The first stage of the rocket launch was a turning to power, perhaps for the first conscious time. The second stage of the rocket launch, turning from my self-centeredness, the root of all my problems. Page 62, read the first sentence. Turning from my self-centeredness to aware, really seriously, consciously aware about other people. And that my relationship with power and my contribution to the people around me is going to be the key that unlocks the door to the success of my life. And then steps 8 and 9, identifying the clouds in me that block the sunlight in me in my relationships with others. I came across a term, I may have even heard it in the sharing in this meeting in the last couple times we've gathered together. This transformation, this conversion experience, steps 1 through 9, is a change from being a puppet to becoming a partner. I mean, I like alliteration and I like the poetry of that. This process cuts the strings that I've attached to circumstances and events, but that control my behavior and my attitude and my feelings. And now, once I finish the 9th step, cutting those strings, those puppet strings to circumstances and events, it's a co-creation, it's a cooperation. I don't do this on my own. It is in fact done to me, but not without me. My definition of a spiritual awakening, that I use the term co-creation. God's the managing partner, but I'm a partner. Converted from a puppet to a partnership. Don't burn your 5th step. Keep it for your 8th step. Well, certainly even for your 6th step. Each of the even steps is an inventory steps. Think about it. Inventory your belief about power. Inventory your self-centeredness. Inventory in step 6, the behaviors that come from that. And then inventory in step 8, the impact of my behavior on others. We make a list of those harms, the way we diminished other people. We talked about this last time, being specific. Who did I diminish? What did I do? My behavior. And what was the actual impact of my behavior on others? This is as far as many people get, identifying their behavior with the harm, and that's just not the case. Take a look at what action is necessary to repair that damage. The specific harm is not my behavior. The specific harm is the impact of my behavior. So what specific action do I need to take? Well, it has 2 connotations, amend. The action primarily at the first is, what do I need to change in me so that I'm not repeating that behavior? I'll just jump right into the heart of the matter for me, my most gross character defect was infidelity. 25 years married, never occurred to me to be faithful. 7 years sober, it never occurred to me to be faithful. Despite I'm 7 years sober in the program with an active relationship with the sponsor, he co-signed my corruption. But I couldn't see and I didn't see, and I didn't know that I didn't know. And when I did that 4th and 5th step, and I did that 6th step, and then I did the sex inventory in a specific way for the very first time, I saw, number one, that I did have principles that I didn't use, and number two, that unless I changed my actions in alignment with the principles that I had, I would drink again. And then in the 8th step, I saw the harm that was being done, certainly to me, but mostly to the people around me. Am I willing to repair that damage? So the answer to number 4, what specific action is to make a commitment to fidelity for me to change. And then what is the specific action I need to take in terms of making amends and attempting to heal? That's a word that's not used necessarily broadly in the big book, but it is my experience with steps 8 and 9, the healing that takes place. That's why forgiveness is such a huge topic. And I'm glad you're looking at that beginning with perhaps Fred Luskin tomorrow. You see, the big book tells us why we're doing this work. It says, sure, we're trying to put our lives in order. Pay attention to the words on page 77. But that's a secondary motivation. At the moment, we are trying to put our lives in order. But this is not the primary purpose. This is not the end in itself. Our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people about us. See, the turning to other with a capital O and the turning to others with a small o, steps 11 and 12 respectively. Other with a capital O, step 11, meditation. Sitting in the presence of power to absorb power. Step 12, using principles to guide us in being useful and helpful to other people. Both words are important, useful and helpful. Turning from my self-centeredness to my relationship with power and to my relationship with people. On page 76, he gives us why we are making this commitment. We did so when we did the 3rd step. He says on page 58, are you willing to go to any lengths? Then you are ready to take certain steps. What does any lengths mean? Oh, that I'm going to finish steps 4 through 9. That's the beginning. That's the commitment at the very start of step 3. I mean, I'm just interpreting what the big book says. You hear lots of other interpretations in meetings. Perhaps they're helpful, but the big book on 58 says, willing to go to any length dash means we are ready to do the steps 4 through 9. Step 3 is no action. It's a prayer of a commitment to action. It's a prayer of a commitment to finish steps 4 through 9. And he says on page 76, remember, it was agreed at the beginning, page 58, we would go to any lengths for victory over alcohol. It's in italics, victory over alcohol, the first half of the first step. But then on page 79, he gives us another suggestion to remember, reminding ourselves. First paragraph on page 79, reminding ourselves that we have decided to go to any length, same words, to find a spiritual experience. Second half of the first step. what's the antidote to our spiritual malady? To find a spiritual experience, a spiritual awakening, an effective relationship with power. If you read the big book, pages 76 to 83, 76 to 83, it's on a combination of steps 8 and 9. And then you read the material from the 12 and 12. Please do that. It's a wonderful commentary. When Bill has 20 or 25 years of sobriety, he writes the 12 and 12, which is commentary, his experience, fleshing out his lack of experience from the big book. Very few instructions, but lots of wonderful observations and commentary on his experience, steps 8 and 9 in the 12 and 12. We review all our relationships. This is a combined list from the big book and the 12 and 12. To be objective, not to come from guilt and shame. Those are not helpful. Even healthy guilt and shame. It's just not helpful. Healthy guilt and shame is therapeutic. Yes, yes. Most of us have unhealthy guilt and shame. Guilt, a negative feeling about our behavior. Shame, a negative feeling about who we very are, our very self. In step 8, he says, it's an accurate and unsparing survey. And these are rigorous terms. A deep and honest search of our motives and actions. We did some of that in step 4. But now we look at step 8 to flesh out the impact of our corruption, our dysfunction, the impact of our behavior on others. An accurate and exhausting survey of our past. Name the flaws in our makeup. List my disturbances and how I injured others because of my disturbance. The instincts in collision, which we looked at in step 6, and began the healing process. I call step 7 prayer, the healing prayer. My creator. It starts, my creator. Oh my God, it's so perfect. My creator, please recreate me. I'm damaged goods. And I can't heal myself on my own power. I have a responsibility to take some action. I have some responsibility to ask for help. I have some responsibility to listen to the direction and take the action, not just from those people who I'm asking for help, but from the life energy itself, the life source and force itself. Who have I hurt or hated or disliked, and what wrongs and even criminal behavior have I been involved in? Where have I betrayed other people or been unfaithful or lacking in integrity? Been negative in my attitude or depressive and then depressing to be around? That negative energy that I saturate my environment with. So in the 12 and 12, he gives us several suggestions: physical, emotional, mental, financial, spiritual. These are the criteria of harms done to other people. Not my behavior, not my attitude, not my thoughts, not my words. No, no, no. Those were just the vehicles of harming other people. What specifically did I harm? How do I make amends to dead people? How do I make amends to live people who I shouldn't see or who I can't find? All of these wonderful questions that come out of the experience of other people. And if the person doesn't have the experience, my own step guide suggested that I go talk to a woman because he didn't have experience in that area. And then review all of these items. I made 3x5 cards for each individual or institution. It's not in the big book, but it was a mechanical device that helped me then sort it and do it more effectively. To name the change in me that was necessary to correct my harmful action, but also to name the impact of my negative behavior on that person or that institution, and to go over it specifically with my sponsor. If you hear nothing else from me but that, this will be very successful. And that is, I could not do this on my own. I'm not objective. I'm not experienced enough. I needed somebody who was objective. They had knowledge. They weren't attached to me, and they had experience. And then I would actually dress rehearse. Once we agreed that this was the right course of action, the more serious ones, like my relationship with my wife, my relationship with my children, or a difficult one, my relationships with my bosses, to dress rehearse. And this man played the role of each person that I was going to make amends to. And I got a sense of the words to use and the feelings to have and the gestures that I would be experiencing in a spontaneous way. And it allowed my step 9 to be much more effective, because I had heard the words, I had felt the feelings, I had experienced in a dress rehearsal. These are not things that are in the big book or in the 12 and 12, but they come out of my experience and other people's experience. The step 8 is a roadmap. At least that's how I saw it in retrospect. It told me what I needed to do, and I made notes as to when I wanted to do them. And I talked about all of that with the sponsor and step guide who was guiding me through this, now helping me navigate this map. And at one point, I had done several, and I was feeling kind of punk one day. I mean, really depressed and irritated and ill at ease. And I called this man and we had lunch, and I shared with him my concerns. And he said, well, you're doing your 9th step now, aren't you? How far are you along in it? I said, well, I've done 6. He said, well, that's wonderful. When's the last time you made one? See, I had the roadmap with me. And I looked at my roadmap, and I had done 6, but it had been a month since I had done any. And I said, it's been a month because I'm really busy now. The promises are being manifested in my life. And I'm very willing to make my amends, but I'm really busy. And he just looked at me with this tender look. It was wonderful. He said, Herb, willingness without action is fantasy. I mean, tender he was, but confrontive he was. You see, he was objective. He had my interests at heart, not my feelings. And I heard it. Willingness without action is fantasy. It's a derivation of from the Bible. What is it? Action, something about, now I'm losing my train of thought there. Works, yes, something. Intentions without works is dead. Faith without works is dead. Well, that's the faith, is that spiritual component, wonderful to have. But if your feet aren't moving in relationship to your faith, it's bullshit. He used the term fantasy. I didn't clean it up. My list turns out to be my accountability partner. It told me where I was, what I had done, when I had done my last one, and what was the next one to do. This man had experience in terms of preparing for the amends. How do you make amends to dead people? And this was his instruction. Go to a cemetery. not the cemetery where my father was buried. He had been cremated and his ashes had been spread. I'm not talking about step 9. I'm talking about the preparation of step 8. So he gave me specific ideas. Once he had given me the instructions on step 9, which I will do next time we get together, he said, you go to the cemetery and you sit there and you pray for this person's presence to be there. And then you write out your 9th step there. Don't prepare it before. Write it out there and then read it out. Those were the instructions in preparation for the step 9 amend. I had the instructions all written down. I knew what to do. And I put a date on there when to do it. And I told him about what I was going to do and when I was going to do it. So not only was my list my accountability partner, but my step guide sponsor was my accountability partner. Not as a drop dead date, deadline kind. No, I don't like those at all. Target date. A specific blueprint kind of plan. I asked, well, there are people that I can't find because I don't even know their names. He had a suggestion for that. You see, I'm preparing my 8-step list. What do I do about people I can't find? Well, then I enumerate the general chronology and the history of it and why it might be important. And then I take the actions in terms of the 9th step that he gives me on those prepared items in my 8 steps. See, I'm separating out step 8 and 9. Bill doesn't do a very good job of separating 8 and 9. In fact, it's the only time he combines them on page 76. But it's pretty easy. Step 8 is a list. And step 9 is an action. There's no reason to confuse the two, especially when you're talking about it perhaps in a meeting on step 8 and or step 9. Certainly in the preparation. Keep it very clear. I'm just doing an inventory now of the negative impact of my behavior on institutions and people over my history. Now, if I've done this work before and it's been thorough by my standards and my sponsors' standards, then I only do the harms that are coming to my consciousness now since the last time I've done the work. Well, I just mentioned people that I can't find because for whatever reason, it's a little easier today with social media and the internet. Back in 1988, we didn't have that. But what about people who you can find, who you actually know where they are, but maybe you shouldn't find? You see, that's a discussion in the preparation of step 8. Will it harm them? That's where he gave me the advice to talk to a woman who I had, in my estimate, harmed 25 years earlier. He said, I don't have any experience with that. Go and talk to a woman. Ask her, number one, would she want that skeleton of 25 years ago dug up? Would she even want that? And if she did, how would she want it to be handled? And I went to a woman with experience and wisdom. And she said, yes, she would want it addressed. And this is how I suggest you do it. This is the 8-step preparation. I'm not telling you what I did in the 9th step. I'm telling you what I did in the preparation for my 9th step by being thorough and specific and talking to experienced people. When I work with people, I have a list of resources. Attorneys who are in the program, accountants who are in the program, insurance adjusters who are in the program, police who are in the program, et cetera, lawyers, therapists who are in the program. Because I don't have that panoramic view of experience that is necessary to help other people navigate their 8th and 9th step process. So I send them to people who have knowledge and experience, common sense. one of the almost a refrigerator slogan that Bill suggests in the 12 and 12. We're attempting to create the best possible relations with everybody. Partnership. He said, we're very poor at having partnerships because we're also self-centered. This is the final feature, 8 and 9, of creating partnerships. How do you make amends for infidelity? Bill is quite clear, actually. I couldn't read it and be clear about it until somebody, my step guide, helped me with that. Pages 81 and 82. A summary of that without going into the details. He says, if they don't know, do we tell them? My interpretation of his suggestion is no. You would be bringing harm to them to give them information they don't have. If they know in a general way, how do we handle that? We make amends in a general way. And he says, he really understands human nature. That person will ask who, what, when, where, how many times. And he suggests in the big book, no details in a general way. I'm just saying preparing in the 8th step. I'm not talking about the execution in the 9th step. I'll do that next week. Specifically, this was probably one of the more dramatic healings that I experienced. Talk about forgiveness. But then third item is, what if they know in detail? He said, really, try to avoid the conversation. Have an understanding with the person, like, let's cut it loose. Look at my hand. Forgiveness, look it up in a dictionary, is a decision to release. Forgiveness is a decision to release, to cut it loose. In my meditation in the Way of Life document that I referred to at the beginning of my talk today, I have a 3-page meditation on forgiveness based on my experience with the step work that I had done the first couple times. A decision to release them. And that meditation has this image of, I am a tugboat towing a barge of my negative history. And forgiveness is cutting the rope to the barge and allowing the tugboat to be free of that garbage barge. Now, it's not that simple. It's a metaphor. It's a poetic approach to realize the freedom that comes from that. The freedom of a properly prepared 8th step and a properly executed 9th step. Recently, I've incorporated the material from Dr. Luskin's book. We met 30 years ago after he published his book. His book is a conversion of his doctoral thesis on forgiveness, which he did back 35 years ago, I think, at Stanford to get his PhD in clinical psychology. And he's become world famous as the result of his skills and his understanding. He was hired by the Northern Ireland government to meet, oh man, I get really choked up, to meet with families who have had their family members murdered. And he was brought over there several times to help with the forgiveness process. I mean, that couldn't be any more dramatic. I've incorporated his stages, I think there are 6, of the progressive nature of the forgiveness process, which I see as beginning with step 4 and concluding with step 9. This is about establishing or reestablishing relationships with others, just to bring healing to those relationships. And step 8, like step 6, like step 4, like step 2. I mean, Bill's consistent. In all these even steps, he says willingness is, in fact, in step 2, he says it's the cornerstone. Willingness is the cornerstone. That stone, that first stone that's put on the foundation that sets the direction of the entire spiritual arch through which we walk to freedom, willingness. Certainly the key to step 6, page 76 in the big book. That one word stands out as the heart of the matter for step 6. A willingness to have them removed, to release our grip on our character defects and shortcomings, realizing that we're powerless even to release the grip. But are we willing to be released? Hear the vocabulary. That combination of my creator, the managing partner, and me in partnership. Read the promises on page 75 at the end of the 5th step, walking hand in hand with the spirit of the universe. What a wonderful poetic image that motivates us and reassures us, walking hand in hand with the spirit of the universe. Willingness to identify specifically the change in me. As I mentioned earlier, amends has 2 connotations. One, amend my behavior, meaning change. There's no point in addressing the harm done to other people if I'm going to continue doing the harm. Now, there's common sense and navigation that you need to have sponsor relationship and direction with. Amend means change, my change. But clearly it also means repairing, reparation, repairing the damage. We can't undo history. Of course, that's just common sense. That's the fact. We can't undo history, but we can bring some sense of repair. In the 8th step, identify the amount of money I stole. No, not me, but I hear it all the time from people. I was a shoplifter and I stole from here and here and here. I said, okay, estimate the dollar amount. Oh, Herb, it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 40 years ago. Yep. Okay. In prayer, estimate the specific dollar amount at Ralph's, at Penny's, at Macy's, each one of them separately. Estimate the dollar amount in the dollar amount of the day. This is the preparation for the 8th step and 9th step. In the 8th step preparation, being specific. There's no vagary here. I gossiped. Really, he said to me when I said that. Did they lose any reputation? Did they lose any opportunity? Did they lose any money? Did they lose any friends? No. Well, then you didn't harm them. Your gossip is what you did, but it was impotent in terms of impact on others. He said, you heard, and he was very kind, but very direct. You're not that powerful and you're not that important. But examine this. He never told me what to do. He always asked me questions or gave me some directions for further clarification. He said, consider the person that you gossip to may have been harmed, not the person you gossiped about. The person that you gossip to may then have been negatively disposed toward that other person and may have avoided a resource that might have been valuable to them. This is not just vagary and poetry and New Age conversation, not to dismiss New Age, but to say that this is about being very, very specific. And then what's the healing action? What's the healing action? You want to bring freedom to them. That's your primary purpose, to bring freedom to them. Oh, yes. Oh, by the way, you want to be free. Of course, like he said on page 77, your primary purpose is their freedom. The byproduct will be your freedom. Listen to the prayer of St. Francis. To the extent that we forgive them, we are forgiven. Listen to the Lord's Prayer. 2,000 years apart in their writing. The same recommendation, same dynamic. The Lord's Prayer. Release them from their debt and you will be released from your debt. The dynamic is perennial. The dynamic is classical. It gets expressed differently. Bondage of addiction is why we probably come to a 12-step program. And the 9th step guarantees, you'll see it when we get there and I'll reinforce it then, but right now I'm just referencing it. Page 84, we are placed in a position of neutrality. I'm quoting, we are placed, hear the grace, in a position of neutrality. We're neither resisting nor attracted to it. Addiction, that's the promise. I'm just quoting the big book and sharing my experience with it, both personally and as I watch other people navigate and complete the 9th step. But then he says we're not cured. We have a daily reprieve because unmanageability is the human condition, not just the addict condition. Unmanageability, the second half of the 1st step. You notice the difference between this cartoon and the first cartoon. This cartoon clearly has a perspective that there are no walls, a ceiling, or floor in this jail that I'm in. I'm in the jail of my making. I'm holding the bars in front of my face, not realizing that I'm holding the bars in front of my face. The benefit of steps 4 through 9 is to release the grip, in forgiving others, bringing forgiveness to others. I am forgiven. I release those bars. I drop the bars. But it's a daily reprieve because my selfishness and self-centeredness is hardwired. And I can't even reduce it much by wishing or trying on my own power. That last sentence in the 2nd paragraph on page 62. He ends his discussion there on unmanageability, the spiritual malady, in the same way he ends his discussion about addiction on page 43. We have no effective mental defense against the first drink. Powerless over our addiction, powerless over our unmanageability, freedom from our addiction when we finish step 9, freedom from our unmanageability if we daily commit to practice 10, 11, and 12, the best kept secret in the rooms. Step 8 is about naming harms. That is the specific negative impact of my behavior on others, people, and institutions. How free do you want to be? That is such a penetrating question and challenging question. And most of us really want to be free. Are you willing? How free and how soon? How free and how soon? This is my version. I, in fact, created it this morning of the healing prayer of step 7. And I'm just going to read it, pray it, reveal it, hold it up as a potential challenge to you to make the 7-step prayer your own. My Creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me, healthy and unhealthy. I pray that you now remove from me every single obstacle in me that stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my helpfulness to others. Grant me strength as I go out from here to be and to live, to be and to live in alignment with reality. I don't know much about God's will. I'm not even sure that that is correct and accurate language. I wrote a meditation on it. Does God really have a will? Does God really have a plan? The second meditation. But I am convinced that step 3 is about alignment with reality. I want to turn and be in alignment with reality, because when I'm in the flow, I fit in my life and I fit in my community. Amen. The 7-step prayer concludes the process of steps 3 through 7. Step 3 does not have an amen. Interesting. Because it's not the end of a prayer, it's the beginning of a process of the rehabilitation of my relationship with myself. And I continue now to attempt to have rehabilitation of my relationship with others. More next week.